Super, hello, welcome everyone. Bonjour à tous, hello. So this is the Montreal Java user group. And if you want to go to the other meetups, I mean, are you here for the Montreal Java user group or not? Yes? Okay, all right. So in case you're not, it's the other rooms are Saint Laurent 4, 5, 6. So in case you're not in the right room, just move on. Cool. I'm just going to introduce quickly the Montreal Java user group. So we, as you may have understood, we are the Montreal Java user group. So here is the team who organized this event. Tonight with me, Anthony, as well as Romain and Félix, organizing this meetup inside Confoo. Of course, we would like to thank Confoo for letting us organize a meetup here tonight. On est content d'avoir Confoo comme partenaire ce soir pour nous permettre d'héberger le jug ici. If you see this little QR code down the road, you can flash it and you will know everything about us, about our group. Everything. Yeah. Oh yeah. You have no idea how much energy Romain has put in this link tree. So there's so much about it. So yeah, actually talking about the link tree, this is what Romain has been doing, and all the information about the Montreal Java user group as well as Devox Orchids. You can find well, once again everything, but also I think you are up into the link tree. There are some links to Scott as well as Kito, who is right there, who are going to present tonight. In case you want to be a partner, I mean, if you want to sponsor the Montreal Java User Group, si vous voulez commanditer le Montreal Java User Group, same thing, just contact us through this QR code and link tree link. Just in case you didn't know, we also, well, I think I just said it before, but we organized the Devox Orchids Quebec chapter. So it was born, Devox Orchids, like 15 years ago in Belgium and the Netherlands. And there is a Montreal, Quebec chapter. Next event is going to be March 21st. Donc le prochain événement, ce sera le 21 mars. If you have children aged 5 to 14, si vous avez des enfants entre 5 et 14 ans, just once again, scan this QR code and subscribe to our mailing list. We will soon announce the next event. On va bientôt annoncer le prochain événement et l'ouverture de la billetterie. OK. In case you are not into children workshops, but rather into a Java user group, then in that case, you can go and present your favorite topic. Si vous avez envie de présenter, venez nous voir. Vous pouvez aussi vous retrouver ici à présenter. It's not every month that we have professional speakers such as Scott and Kito. Sometimes we have like first-timers, and we love you all. So, anyways, yeah, comme vous voulez, vous êtes tous les bienvenus à venir présenter au jug. Okay, so we have Confoo tonight, and also, yeah, Java 26 is actually next March 27. It's not an LTS release, so that it's just intermediate release for 6 months. Not much to say yet, but probably we'll talk a little bit more next month. But we are going to announce also, we would announce our next event happening in March, and I think it's going to be, what is going to be, Félix? What are we doing next month? You forgot? The workshop at McGill? Yeah. All right, there you go. So yeah, so next month we're going to run a workshop at McGill, and the workshop will be contribute my first open source project. All right, so yeah, we'll do, yeah, something like that. Anyways, just subscribe and then you'll soon find out. Okay, I don't want to stay on the stage for much longer tonight. Je ne veux pas non plus rester trop longtemps. You're here for our presenters, and the first tonight is you, Scott. Thank you very much, Scott.
So thank you, Anthony, for the introduction. I appreciate it. I am a big fan of user groups, not just Java user groups, but any technology that has support from the community the way the Java community supports user groups is fantastic. I do want to get one thing out of the way. Anthony's speaker. Keep in mind, that's only because I get paid to talk that has nothing to do with the quality of what you're about to hear. So my name is Scott Strohs. I am a developer advocate on the MySQL community team, and it may seem strange that I'm coming here to talk to you about something not related to MySQL. And as I mentioned when I was up before, it's because my boss is also oversees the Java community team at Oracle, the way she oversees the MySQL community team. And there is kind of a little bit of a bleed over. And Anthony asked me not to have something database related because apparently some of you don't get as excited about databases as I do. And I find that to be very, very sad. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is a fresh way to write code in VSC. How many people here know that Oracle just released an official, I shouldn't say just, but recently released an official VSC extension for Java? All right, you guys are going to learn something. As a matter of fact, everybody without their hand up just learned something. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the extension and some of the features that are available to it. And real quick, how many of you have never used VSC before? Everybody here has used VSC? Damn. Darn. Sorry. So before we get started, probably need to turn this on. I do. So before we get started, this is the obligatory I love me slide. I am a full stack developer. I have been a full stack developer for longer than the term full stack developer has actually been in existence. I've been a developer so long that that's what we used to call ourselves, just developers. So I started writing code before people split out into specialized team and then brought everybody back in together into, where everybody did everything. I was once the king of the circus. I was 10 years old, went to the Ringling Brothers Circus in New York City at Madison Square Garden. They plucked me out of the crowd, put on a crown and a cape on me, gave me a little scepter, and marched me up the steps of the center ring in the middle of the circus. It was awesome. I loved it. Until they made me hold the hand of the queen. And then I cried. Apparently a lot, from what I understand. And this little guy right here is my dog Murphy. He is, without a doubt, the best office mate in the world. The reason why is Murphy spends pretty much all day, every day in my office, mostly at my feet. Now, some people are like, yeah, but that's what dogs do. You're right. But what Murphy does is when I have to troubleshoot a problem, when I'm trying to figure out some code or a database issue, I talk to Murphy about it. And then he looks at me with those eyes, and then miraculously, I get the answer. I get the solution. Now, granted, I know it's probably more because I'm talking through it with someone, even if they don't understand what I'm saying. But Murphy has helped me through many, many problems. And this is Murphy when he was a puppy. This is Murphy as the 112-pound beast that he is now. Sorry, I didn't do the metric conversion before I came here. I apologize for that. So first of all, everybody said they already know what VSC is or has done, so I can kind of breeze through these slides a little bit. But VS Code is a lightweight, extensible code editor. Now, I'm going to be honest. I don't really use VSC. Not really a big fan of the workflow inside of VSC. I use IntelliJ for pretty much everything that I do. Database stuff, Java stuff, Node stuff. I tend to use IntelliJ. There are people who think VSC is the greatest thing since Pockets. And I found a great way to get under those people's skin. If you're ever talking to somebody and they're really amped up about VSC and they think, VSC, it's the best, it's awesome. You know what you say to them? That kind of looks like Sublime. They don't like that. It's free to use from Microsoft, and honestly, for a product that is free, it is very robust in terms of its features. I'm not saying I never use VSC. It's rarely do I use it. I'll usually open up VSC to look at config files just because it's easier to open them and not have them be brought into a project like in IntelliJ. And it has a very extensive ecosystem. So there's a lot of extensions that are available for VSC to do. As a matter of fact, I feel safe in assuming there's probably at least 2 extensions in VSC to do anything you ever need to do in code. At least 2. The only problem is there's not one good database extension. Not one. And that's probably the thing that's holding me back. I work with MySQL or MySQL all the time. The the extensions that they have for managing database stuff, I don't like. And that includes the Oracle one that we have for MySQL. So real quick, for those who maybe haven't used VSC in a while, this is what an editor page looks like. The highlighted area is going to be where whatever extension or feature you're looking at. In this particular case, we're looking at a project view. It's going to be sitting there, not quite in the left gutter, but just inside the left gutter. And then that's the main coding window. So you're going to be able to, this is where when you type, the letters are actually going to appear. Sorry, that was a joke. I know you guys understand what I'm talking about. And then on the right-hand side, there's like a little mini preview so you can see what the code looks like if you were looking at it from 1,000 miles away, which honestly, I never really understood the need for that, but that's just me. Down bottom, there's another area where you can do a lot of different things. In this particular case, this is showing you a terminal window. So just like IntelliJ, inside of VSC, you can open up terminal windows, run commands, stuff like that. On the right-hand side is the left gutter. This is where you're going to see all of your extensions be presented if you select them to be presented. So here you can actually see, if you know what you're looking for, there is a GitHub extension. I can't see what else is in the picture. There's a database one, and there's the MySQL shell extension and a Gradle extension. And then up top this is probably where the biggest difference is between IntelliJ and VSC when it comes to doing other stuff. This is like, it's almost like an omnibar. You can do a lot of things in here, but if you need to open the palette, which is the way that you can execute commands for some of the different extensions, that's where the stuff's going to show up. So why did Oracle decide that they wanted to have an extension in VSC for Java? Well, one of the reasons is developers, we're kind of a fickle bunch. There are people who they find a tool and they stick with it. I am guilty of that. Okay, I will probably use IntelliJ until the day I die or they stop making it. And even when they stop making it, I'm going to keep the last version that I had. But one of the things that I think has kind of haunted a lot of IDEs in the past is the fact that they're not very lightweight. They use a lot of resources. I know I have to shut down IntelliJ every once in a while because it's just gobbling up so much RAM. But VSC tends to be lightweight. It also allows you to have some flexible workflows, and a lot of developers use it. Now, I don't know if a lot of developers use it because it's free, or because it's good, or because it's good and free. I don't know, because I don't think those two are necessarily mutually exclusive. You can have good free things, you can have bad free things, you can have good expensive things, you can have bad expensive things. But I do know there are a lot of people, a lot of developers using a lot of different languages who use VSC on a regular basis, and the ones that really, really love it. So what we have is the Java Platform extension. It is our official extension. Now, if you search the extensions in VSC for Java, you're going to find lots of them. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to make sure to use the right one. It focuses on simplicity, performance, and clean workflow. And it integrates nicely with some of the existing Java tools that already exist inside of VSC. I will say, when I was putting together this demo and I was playing around with the extension, there were some features that I really liked. Now, it's entirely possible that these features do exist inside of IntelliJ in a way that I haven't been able to enable them. I'm not going to say that everything you're going to see here tonight is new. Some of it was new to me, but there are some things in the VSC extension that a couple times I went, like it was a nice little feature, or it was intuitive. So to install the extension, the first thing you do is you click the little, it looks like a little Rubik's Cube with one of the corners being taken off. And that's basically your extensions panel. And inside the extensions panel, you can view what extensions you have installed, or you can search for ones that are not installed. Now, in this example, I type in Java. Don't do that. Because if you do that, you're going to have to scroll quite a way before you get to the official Java one. So if you want to install this in VSC, I would put Oracle Java, and then it'll probably show up pretty close to the top. But make sure you pick the one that is certified as being from Oracle Corporation, or else then it's not going to be the right extension. And then once you find it, you click install. It'll do its magic. It'll pop up a page, like in VSC, it pops up a tab that shows you information about the plugin. One of the features that I really liked about the VSC Java Platform plugin is the JDK downloader. Yes, I know those exist in other tools, but this was stupid easy to do. It wasn't hard to find. It wasn't hard to determine. So as somebody who, I would not classify myself as a Java developer, and sometimes when I'm working in Java projects or I need to change JDKs in IntelliJ or something like that, it's not as intuitive as I think it could be. Here it was very intuitive. And it actually allows you to not only download a JDK, but it allows you to specify a JDK you already have installed on your system that you can then be pulled into VSC. And I think probably the coolest part is if you download a JDK, you can tell it where to put it. That's another problem I have, is sometimes I forget where stuff is by default. So if you install Java on a Mac, which I've done twice maybe in the last 4 years, I forget where the stuff is. But if I have a JDK and I have a folder that says this is where the JDKs are, it's easier to remember. You can specify the JDK version to use VSC wide, or you can even specify individual projects to use different JDKs. So if you have one JDK that you have for your entire system, if you want to use one of the newer versions that came out, but then you wind up working on a project that supports a later version, or early version, sorry, then you can actually specify in the project which JDK VSC should use. Again, not something that's unique to VSC. I just think it was a little bit easier to do inside of the editor itself. So now to run the JDK downloader, you go to that middle bar where you do the palette, and what you have to do is you have to do Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and that'll bring up the palette. Then you can start typing. In this particular case, we type in JDK, and we'll see a thing that comes up that says download, install, and use JDK. And then when you click that, you're going to get a window that pops up. And you can download the Oracle JDKs, Oracle Open JDK, or as I said, you can select a JDK that actually exists on your system itself. So if you have something that's not available through any of those dropdowns, but you already have it on your system, you can import it. You get to pick, you can pick which JDK version you want, which operating system you want, and which machine architecture you want. And I didn't do it here, but when you click install, it actually asks you where you want to put it. The versions of Java that the VSC extension supports go back to JDK 8. So anything JDK 8 and higher is supported by the extension. And it actually does include early access to upcoming JDK releases. I don't know offhand if you use the extension now, if you'll have early access to the JDK that's coming out next month. I don't know that for certain. I don't know how early the access is. There is support for Gradle and Maven. Using the JDK extension, or I'm sorry, the Java extension, you can do create Java project, and it will actually walk you through what type of project is it. And I think I can't remember the exact workflow, but I do know you say whether it's Gradle or Maven, and then it will actually create everything and give you like a little skeleton app where it's just one Java file that I believe does a hello world that I turned into a hello Montreal. This was one of those ones where I went, huh, because I had this file open, and after I installed the plugin, I saw that show up in the editor. So I'm like, oh, that's got to be a feature of the plugin. Let's see if it works. Because a lot of times when I see stuff like this and I click, nothing works. Because I missed some type of configuration, or there's a class that's missing, or there's a library that's missing, or something that wasn't working, even in basic stuff. So I clicked run main, and holy crap, it worked. It ran. okay? And then I was like, oh, that was cool. So then I'm like, oh, let me see the debug. So I hit debug main, and it just worked. I was able to put breakpoints in, and it caught them. It was very, very easy. I thought it was very, very intuitive. Again, I'm not saying this is unique to VSC, but that's not something I had seen in stuff that I've worked in IntelliJ before. Granted, I haven't worked with Java and IntelliJ in a little bit, so it's possible that that's something that does exist in there now. How many people here like Jupyter-style notebooks? Good, I'm not alone, because I'm not a big fan. They're pretty popular with Python, and I don't know if it's the Jupyter-style technology that I'm not particularly fond of, or Python that I'm not particularly fond of, but anytime anybody's ever given me a Jupyter notebook for Python, I've never been able to run it, ever. I was trying to troubleshoot an issue with somebody at Oracle, and they're like, here, just grab this notebook. And it took us like 3 hours just to get the freaking notebook to run, because there was configuration issues and all sorts of problems with my system, even though they said it wasn't supposed to work. But again, Jupyter notebooks are something that people love. People use them all the time. It's neat. They are neat because they do offer an interactive development environment. So you can actually type in code and get almost an instant response back, whether it's good or bad, whether stuff worked or there's an error. I would say probably one of the neatest things about Jupyter Notebooks is the fact that you can include documentation in line, because inside of Jupyter Notebooks, it supports Markdown. So you can actually add Markdown, around your code or around your snippets or whatever to explain what it is that the code's doing, and it's not going to affect executing that code. There's support for visualization. So you can actually write some code in a Jupyter Notebook that creates a graph. It'll pop up in graph data, and you're going to see a demo of that in a little bit, because I thought that was pretty cool. Now I know that's also something that a lot of people use Python for, or Jupyter Notebooks with Python for. And again, I thought it was going to be a pain to get it to work with Java, just because it's Jupyter Notebooks and I've had issues. But the demo I put together, it worked literally the first time I tried it, with no errors, no you're missing a class or anything like that. It just worked, which I thought was really cool. I'm going to put that on me and not the Jupyter Notebooks, because I've had problems with Jupyter Notebooks before. And then also, Jupyter Notebooks offer a collaborative environment. So this is actually very, very helpful if you have a younger, less experienced developer working on something side by side with a more senior developer, in the fact that they can share notebooks. So you can actually check notebooks into GitHub, so that if the junior dev is like, I don't really understand this, the senior dev can go, hey, let me put together a notebook for you, and then check it into the repository, and then the junior dev has it right there, and then they can make changes or whatever and get a better idea of the workflow of the code. And then you also have, we also have JShell, which I'm going to be honest, I'd never heard of before, but apparently been around for a while. You're nodding like, yes, it has. But I honestly had never heard of it before. And I thought this was probably cooler than the notebooks. I think it was cooler than the notebook working, because the very basic example I put together, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. And again, it just worked, which is fantastic. The cool thing about JShell is it's got the interactive RPL. There's no boilerplate code required. So if you want to test out how a function would work, you could just write the function in JShell and not have to worry about anything else, and you'll be able to execute it. This is good for rapid prototyping. So if there's stuff that you want to try, you can open up JShell, try it without having to go through an entire process of building an app or creating classes or whatever, and you can just type it and then execute it and see if it works. And the cool thing, again, with the JShell, just like the notebooks, is there's almost immediate feedback. And when I say almost, because some stuff may take a little while to run, but it's not going to be like you have to wait like a half hour for stuff to build and see if everything worked. And again, also great for learning. This is a very good place for people to to be able to play around with some Java code without being overwhelmed by the fact that you need to build out an application and have class files and stuff like that. They can just start using JShell to get an idea of how the Java code, especially if you're creating functions or methods, can be architected or written. There's a lot of other stuff involved. Those to me were just the big ones that I thought, they were the one, this is all the stuff that I went, oh, that was pretty cool. There's other stuff that's included. I could probably talk for several hours of everything, but I really didn't want to do that because I think you would find me very boring after that amount of time. But I do have a couple of demos that I want to show real quick. And it's basically the cooler stuff that I've done. Oh, that did switch. Awesome. Let me go that. So here you can see this is a very basic file here. So this is the command stuff I said that just like popped up there. Like it just appeared, which I was like, now I have to be honest, when that first happened, I thought I did something wrong. I was like, wait, why'd that happen? So if you just see this and you go, hey, I want to click this function, see what happens, you'll actually see down the bottom, it shows you what it does, what it runs, and then you can see when it runs, it actually says, hello, Montreal. So, hello, Montreal. And then the debug main, again, I was like, is that really gonna work? Put a breakpoint in, click debug main. And I will say, it took me a lot longer than it should have to figure out where in the UI I could step over that line of code because it's up top here. I was thinking it was down here on the side. It's up here. So when you're debugging the code, to step over stuff or to step through stuff is up here. And then when you step through, you'll see that it's done. And again, I thought the really cool part about the fact that it freaking worked. And it worked like right away, like literally no configuration on my part. I had that demo up and running in literally probably like 2 minutes after installing the extension, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool that you can get the stuff working that quickly. So now, to go back to, I'm going to show you now an example of a Jupyter notebook. And the Jupyter notebook I have here, where'd it go? Oh, there we go. This is actually just a very basic class, or not even class, code that generates a line chart. Okay? And again, this is something that you can do in a lot of other places, but I thought this was pretty easy, where if I go up here and I click Run All, oh, don't fail me now. Notebook session, what? Oh no. I wonder if things got messed up because, here, let's restart the session. Yes, I'm sure I want to restart the session. There we go. Now if I hit Run All, it pops up the window with the chart. And I think this is cool if you're working on something, especially the visual part of this, where maybe you may be working on a complex charting solution with Java. This is a cool way, really quick way to see if you actually have it without having to put it into the classes and run it that way. And then last thing I want to show is the J shell. Come on, here we go. So if I do that, and then I do open J shell. So here you see the shell just opens up and it says, okay, you can start typing. And I'm a very, very poor typist, especially when I'm under pressure and in front of a crowd. So I'm just going to copy and paste these. So all I'm doing here is I am going to be creating a function called add that takes 2 integers and then returns the sum of those 2 numbers. And you'll see it says created method add. And then I'm going to create a method called subtract. You guys care to guess what that one does? That's right, it shows the difference of 2 integers. I'm a good programmer. And I hit enter there, you'll see that it says create method subtract. And then if I take this code right now, or this line, oops, And I put it in here, and you see what I'm doing is I call add, I pass in 5, and then the second argument for add is I call subtract, and I pass in 5 and 2. And if you do your math real quick, you'll find out that the answer is 8. So when you create functions like that, when you write code like that inside of the J shell, it'll stay living in there for as long as that session exists. As soon as I close this particular tab and J shell goes away, add and subtract will no longer be there. I'd have to restart it again and re-add the code. I think both JShell and Jupyter, they have some kind of, the Jupyter notebooks, they have some kind of crossover in terms of functionality, but I do see that they also have very specific reasons why you would use one over the other. I think the Jupyter notebooks are probably better for learning and prototyping, obviously more complex things, because you still have all the advantages of having the code hinting and the colors to let people so when it's a variable or whatever. But to be able to really quick type stuff into JShell like that, I honestly don't know how I didn't know that JShell existed before I started writing this presentation, because that is really, really cool. And again, I'm not saying it's been invented for VSE, but the fact that you have access to it so quickly in VSE, I think is pretty cool. Might even turn me into a VSE person. No, that's a lie. So again, there's a lot of other stuff that's available with the plugin. I just tried to hit the stuff that I thought would be more interesting to people who are here. Granted, some of it might have been a little bit, well, that's for noobs. Well, hi, I'm kind of a noob when it comes to Java. But something that a lot of people don't know, unless you've been to my talks before, is at Oracle, we have a group called Oracle University. And Oracle University is the group at Oracle that is responsible for creating and maintaining certification exams. When my team comes out to speak to at conferences or user groups, we are actually allowed to offer a voucher that will cover the cost of one certification exam. Now, you guys are probably going, I want a MySQL certification exam. What do I need that for? Well, here's the thing. Don't tell my boss this. Once you get the voucher, we have no way of knowing what you used it for. So if you're thinking that you might be ready to sit for a Java exam, you can sign up with me when we're done tonight, and you'll get a credit. I believe the credit's $175. And you can use that to take a Java exam. Or if you want to take a MySQL exam, you can do that. The other thing is the fact that it's a general credit that's available on Oracle University. So if you want to use that credit to offset the cost of some of the training that's available on Oracle University, you could do that as well. You don't have to use it for a certification exam. If you're interested, I'll probably sit back over there when my talk is done, and then when Keto's done, you guys can come over and let me know if you're interested. All I need is your name and your email address. That's it. And your agreement that it's okay if Oracle University contacts you, because we need to let you know that the credit's been applied. And then lastly, if you want to reach me, my email is scott.strohs@oracle.com. Blue Sky at strohs.dev, LinkedIn, Scott-Strohs. And there's Murph. I miss him already. I've only been gone from him for a couple of hours. And this is the QR code that will bring you to the page that tells you about the VSC extension. So if you want to scan that to install the extension, go right ahead. And does anybody have any questions? And if you do, please don't make them difficult. Yes, sir.
So Gradle and Maven support, it works just with the extension without any connection.
As far as I know, yes.
Second one, do you know if there's support to run a specific test, meaning if there's support for unit and to test again?
I believe there is. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there is. That is probably something I should have put in this talk. And I feel bad now that I left it out. But thank you for the suggestion. You had a question?
Yes, are you guys going to release a plugin for new Vim as well?
I couldn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
Are you guys also going to release a plugin for Neo Vim as well?
I don't know. And if I did, I couldn't tell you. Yes, sir.
I saw there was a run continuous like next to run on the hood.
That's one I didn't try. So I don't know what that does. What he was talking about was that in the annotations above the code, there was the run, there was a debug, and then there was continuous run. I actually didn't click that, so I don't know. I don't know exactly what it does. I mean, I could hypothesize, but I don't want to be wrong. I'm wrong enough, so. Yes.
Yeah, also I see that there's an extension from Microsoft and also Red Hat. Like, do they all work together or like, do they have overlap?
That is what the marketing people have said, that they do work together. And I'll be honest, I actually uninstalled some of the Java stuff when I was putting this presentation together, just so it was easier for me to find stuff in the palette that I knew was from our extension. Because if you don't, and you type in like Java or JDK, you'll get a bunch of different options, and it might be a little confusing, and I wanted to make sure that it was very visible. But I mean, I had no problems running any of the stuff I had. It was just, you know, trying to find stuff in the palette to put the presentation together. That it was kind of confusing. But they do work together. You can have them all installed at the same time. I think you had a question?
That was actually my question. I have the extension pack for Java.
Uh-huh.
I think has 6 extensions within it.
Right. From the ones from Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a Red Hat one in there. But, so I wanted to know if there would be conflict or
I've
experienced conflict issues. I forget which plugin. But
I did not experience any issues when I did have all that stuff installed beforehand. And again, the only reason why I uninstalled it was so that it would be easier for me to grab stuff for the slides. As a matter of fact, I think I might have even reinstalled it again. I can't remember. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Kito. This presentation is called Modernizing the Mission Critical with OpenRewrite and AI. And although I was called a professional speaker, I don't think I called myself that either. But I don't get paid to speak, so hey, there's something. So I've been a consultant for many years, and part of what I do is just going to conferences, talking to people like Ken. Yeah, so without further ado, this is my bragging slide. I don't have a dog, I just have boring bullet points. I run a little consulting company called Virtua. We're based in the US, in about 2 hours south of Washington, DC in Virginia. But our clients are pretty much all over the world. I've been involved with Java and the Java community for a very long time. I was involved with a lot of the Java community process specifications back in the day. These days I'm involved with the Eclipse Foundation and Jakarta EE, which is the successor to Java EE from back in the day. I used to be a Google developer expert for web technologies. So I basically deal with like Java in the back end and front end development. So I'm a full stack developer, but although I could write JavaScript on the back end, I'd prefer to write Java. And we also work with cloud environments, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also a Java champion as well. And yeah, so that's my slide. So before we get too far, I thought I'd start with a definition. So we call this session, modernizing the mission critical. So what does that actually mean, right? So I, of course, looked to my handy friend Wikipedia. I didn't ask ChatGPT, I just went to Wikipedia directly. And it told me that it's software modernization, also known as legacy modernization or platform modernization, refers to the conversion, rewriting, or porting of a legacy system to modern computer programming languages, architectures, like microservices, software libraries, protocols, or hardware platforms. Legacy transformation aims to retain and extend the value of legacy investment through migration to new platforms to benefit the advantage of new technologies. It's a mouthful, but I think that's fairly accurate. So basically what we're looking at is some system that's older than you care to admit that you're working with, that the organization probably is looking at modernizing, okay? And their main reason for doing that is because rewriting stuff is expensive. It may be getting a little bit cheaper with all the AI tools, but it's still expensive, right? So often the best choice is to do what we call modernization. So before I get to the details, I'd like to hear a little bit about you guys. So how many of you work on what's called, on a legacy system? Okay. All right, only a few of you. How many of you work on like a brand new shiny, or lots of brand new shiny systems? Awesome, okay. All right, how many of you are in the middle of a modernization effort now? Okay, excellent. All right, so that gives me an idea. So I'm happy for all of you who get to work with shiny new systems. Good for you. I guess I shouldn't be too sad that all the legacy systems exist because that's part of my work, so it pays the bills. As a matter of fact, I had the joy of working with a system that I helped start like over 15 years ago, and actually helped migrate it from an older version of WebSphere and all this kind of stuff. Long story. But eventually, I got to see its whole life cycle, and got to see the system that replaced it and everything. So it's kind of cool to see, okay, here are my comments from like 15 years ago, and here's the new system that we're working with. So, all right, so what I always wonder when I go see a client and I see their code, I say, why is it like this? Why are they stuck on Java 8? And it's a production system with lots of users that the company depends on. So it's not like some random system that's running on a computer in the back corner. Maybe that doesn't need to be upgraded, right? Only 2 people are using it, who cares? But if you have a mission critical system, like why hasn't it been upgraded? What's the reason? So I basically decided that there's a few different reasons. One is the if it ain't broke, don't fix it problem. And this is actually more prevalent than I thought it was, because it's not really the way I look at things, but I've worked with developers at client sites, and they're leaving some crud in the code base or something, and I'm like, well, why don't you delete that? It doesn't work. And they're like, well, it's not harming anything. And I'm like, yes, it is. It's harming the cognitive load of your system, right? You have stuff in there which doesn't work. It's not useful, right? But a lot of people think like that. And it's not necessarily easy to get past that. And if management thinks like that, you can have the coolest developer in the world, but they need to convince management to give them time to worry about it, right? And of course, I think probably the most valid reason is maintenance mode, right? The app is in maintenance mode. Why does it need to be upgraded, right? And the other thing, which is very common, especially in smaller organizations, is focusing on features and bug fixes, right? So the business is focusing on things that drive core value. And core value keeps clients happy. It helps you get new clients. And of course, you can actually draw a direct line to revenue, right? You added this new feature, clients got happy, maybe you got a new customer, or you retained a client that you were worried about losing. So there's a direct line there. And I think that's really part of one of the main reasons companies usually just don't bother upgrading stuff, right? The other reason is that there's not really a process for doing it, right? If nobody is worried about new versions of anything, then it's probably not going to happen, right? In some organizations, there are people that worry about these things a lot. In some organizations, there aren't. Sometimes there's whole teams that worry about it, right? Like security teams. And sometimes there's not. So the other thing is lack of vision. One of the things that I started doing with clients is when I come in, I'm like, so where do you see this application in 5 or 10 years? Or actually, usually it's where do you see it in the next 1 or 2 years? Where do you see it after that? And sometimes they don't have an idea, because they're focusing on just getting features out and running the business, not really thinking about how is the architecture of the system going to change over time, right? So that often, if no one's thinking about that, then you're much more likely to be in a situation where you're stuck on Java 8 and ancient versions of every library, right? So those are the reasons that I see in terms of why people don't actually upgrade or migrate or upgrade, keep their libraries up to date, et cetera. So what are the actual drivers of modernization beyond that? what makes an organization actually bother to upgrade stuff or to change a layer to a different technology? Well, one of them, of course, is the actual components they're using are getting pretty old, right? So eventually, there's a large amount of tech debt that's built up, right? And you've got all this old code, and you've also got old libraries, right? And the number one driver that I see with old libraries is security vulnerabilities, right? So now we're in a world where we actually keep track of security vulnerabilities, excuse me. And it's easy to find out if a library has a bug that causes a problem, right? And find out how serious it is. And now that level of transparency means it's more likely for people in management, other people in the company, and clients to know what the problem is. And often what I hear is the clients are like, hey, we noticed that your app has all of these security vulnerabilities. Isn't that a bad thing? And the company's like, well, yeah, it is. Maybe we should do something about that, right? So that's a big driver because you want to keep customers happy because customers, if they're happy, you can get new customers and you, of course, can make money. That's important. The other driver I see for security is the internal security team. So for organizations that are large enough to have a security team, they look at the code bases and they're like, this is a big problem, right? So depending on where they are in the organization, it may be very important that those vulnerabilities are managed, right? And you also may have a situation with senior leadership. So sometimes the leadership is actually aware that there are issues. And also what they do sometimes is they may be worried that they're going to get hacked, right? So let's say you're a financial institution, you want to make sure you don't get hacked and end up on the news. That's bad for business, right? So there's actually a very, very strong external driver from the management perspective for security updates. So that's definitely the number one thing I see. Also, this kind of goes hand in hand with something called an SBOM. Anyone heard of an SBOM? Software Bill of Materials. So sometimes clients look for those. They're like, hey, we're running your software on-prem or we're working with a cloud version. We want to know what all the components are inside of it. So an SBOM basically says these are all the actual libraries that are being used, right? And there's a standard format that different systems and clients and people can consume, right? So if you do that and all your libraries are out of date, that's not a good thing. So another thing is that you may be stuck with old libraries because you're using Java 8 or whatever, right? One of the things I want you to remember is that regardless of what happens, if you just upgrade the JVM version, you can actually get more performance and a lot of security fixes. So that's something to keep in mind. But sometimes we'll see that they kind of, the organization wants to upgrade, but there's something holding them back, right? So there's one or more components that's preventing them from upgrading to newer components. And this affects the scalability of the app. It can affect performance. It can also affect the developer experience. This is something that I think a lot of organizations don't keep in mind as much, right? If you're stuck on an older version of Java or older versions of libraries, your developers are like, hey, I kind of want to work with something new, So that's another thing that I see as well. Another common driver is the end of life. Larger organizations like to pay for support, even if there's never really any reason to use it, but they like to have it. It's an insurance policy, right? So sometimes what will happen is the support contract will go out for a particular version of software, and they'll actually bother upgrading. So I saw this with a client, the client I mentioned before earlier, that they had an ancient version of WebSphere running all their stuff, and the WebSphere support was ending for that version of WebSphere, so they wanted to upgrade to a newer version. So that can happen as well. Okay. Another common reason is cloud migration. Does anyone here work with systems that are actually not running on a cloud? Okay. Now, are you guys is it a government system or financial or what? Neither? Okay. So, I've noticed that all the cloud vendors are still really trying to get everybody to migrate to the cloud. I don't think everyone has to, because sometimes it can be more expensive, but that's often a common driver, right, is to actually migrate to the cloud. And usually this comes with perceived lower costs and increased scalability, right? Okay, so let's say you have drivers and you've, you actually want to do something about it. So you can start a modernization project. Woohoo! And get going. So I don't know if anyone notice this character, but JetBrains just turned, what was it, 30 or 25? I can't remember. Anyways, well, IntelliJ did, and this is the little mascot they created. It's the run button in IntelliJ. Animated, and actually you can get you can get an IntelliJ plugin. If you type in Runzo, it'll let you play a little game with Runzo in IntelliJ. So, but I think he's cute, so I think he deserves to live outside of that world. So if you want to do modernization, the first thing is think about what the actual goal is. What are you trying to accomplish? There's all these different levels to it. It seems like fairly simple. Let's say you're stuck on like, an old version of Spring Boot or an old version of Java EE or something. You're like, okay, well, I just want to upgrade to the new one, right? But usually it's more complicated than that, because if you've got a legacy system, one that's been around a long time, I've been seeing systems that are like older than my kids. My oldest kid is 14. It's been around a long time. Has lots of different libraries. So there may be other things going on, and you need to actually decide what you want to worry about. What's the scope, right? So is it just to upgrade libraries? Is it upgrade Spring Boot, Spring Framework, upgrade an app server? What is the goal? And then there are other things you don't always think about, like maybe you need to upgrade the look and feel, right? And we've been dealing with this very, very unique niche of organizations that use this old Java server faces component library called Rich Faces, and they want to upgrade because Rich Faces has been dead for 8 years. But they don't want to rewrite the whole thing in React or something. So we help them convert to like prime faces. So that's actually part of their requirement. And the reason they want to do that isn't just because they want a new look and feel, but because Rich Faces, being 8 years old and dead, has dependencies that are outdated, right? And sort of holds everything back. So there can be other libraries like that, like I said before, that are like holding back other, basically keeping you from upgrading other libraries. Of course, you could want to move to another UI framework if you've got an app that has a user interface as well. So what is the goal? And another one, of course, is just modernizing. Let's say you've got an old, outdated monolith and you want to make it microservices. You should think twice before you do that, but you could. Or maybe you just want to make it a modular monolith, right? But you want to refactor it so you can pull out different parts of your microservices if you want to. And maybe you want to remove deprecated or unnecessary layers. So one project we were on, we were doing that sort of rich faces to prime faces migration, but we also made lots of other recommendations by looking at their stack. And one of them, part of it was upgrading Hibernate and all that kind of stuff, JPA, et cetera. And also they had sort of the old antiquated EJB pattern with like 3 or 4 different layers before it actually does anything, and remote EJBs, which weren't even necessary because they're all running on the same machine, right? So they decided with our recommendation to actually, change all of that to CDI, which is the current Jakarta EE replacement, which is a lot like the Spring dependency injection. So you can do other things like that along the way, right? But you just need to decide what that scope is. Another thing which has come up with us, which is interesting, is packaging. So some clients that we've had generally have on-prem installations, and when you do that, there's a lot that goes into like installing it on your client site. And so there's things that you can think about when you're upgrading, making changes, is like how I want to change how the packaging occurs. Do I want to create a fat jar file? Do I want to use Docker? Or do I want to keep on having a fancy installer like 1999? And like any project, you're going to have to worry about constraints, right? So The number one constraint on any project seems to be time. And so you got to keep that in mind. What can you actually accomplish in the time that needs to be, that's allotted, right? Usually it's someone promised somebody something to be done at a certain time without seeing how long it's supposed to actually take. Of course, there's risk as well. So how much risk are you going to incur? And then of course there's resources, who's available to help, and who can actually work on it. And it's important if you work on one of these modernization projects to actually make sure people are dedicated to work on it. Even if you're working with an outside vendor, there needs to be like somebody whose job it is to be involved. Otherwise, things don't get done, right? And the other thing that we see is that sometimes organizations don't actually provide QA, which is a bad idea, right? So if you're doing any sort of major surgery on an application, you need to make sure QA is involved from day one, so that things can be tested. Even if you have automated tests, however you do QA needs to be handled. Obviously, the more automated tests you have, the better, but as we know, that's not always the case. And one of the things that bit us on one project is since we were replacing the user interface, we also did Spring upgrades and all that kind of stuff too. But we said, well, you know, if we're replacing the user interface, it looks really old and crappy. So why don't we give it the new modern look and feel that the rest of your application has, right? And that's an extra value add for you. And they're like, yeah, sure, great idea. So we added that to our estimates and everything. But nobody thought to make sure that the head of design actually had any bandwidth to help us with our project. So they became a bottleneck because we'd be like, hey, what is this supposed to look like? I don't know. And they wouldn't be able to get back to us, and it caused a lot of friction. So just make sure that whoever has any, any touch points with the project actually is available. Okay, and this brings us to another point, which is, are we just upgrading stuff, or are we actually improving stuff, right? Because they're pretty different things. So if you're upgrading libraries and upgrading Java, then it's more about, okay, you're focusing on making sure everything works exactly the same, but uses whatever new APIs are required. Not that you wouldn't like to use, but if an API changed and you upgraded it to a new library, that you should fix that, right? But you wouldn't go back and like change to use pattern matching just for fun, or go back and change all of the if statements and for statements to use streams just for fun. So you would basically be looking at, okay, am I just upgrading libraries, making sure things still work, or are you saying, okay, well, I'm upgrading, but I also want to do some refactoring, like do the modular monolith thing, or break it out of microservices, or whatever it needs to be. But you kind of have to make that decision up front, otherwise you're going to have problems, right? This is something I struggle with. I do more architecture, but also development. And I go to some code and I really want to make it better. I really, really want to make it better. But, I have to decide, depending on the scope, whether or not I can do that. Because also refactoring increases the risk, right? So if you're refactoring and you're upgrading libraries at the same time, it becomes a riskier project, right? So once you've gone through all that, I think there's two main approaches. There is what we call the Big Bang approach, where you basically say, all right, I am going to go and work on all this upgrade stuff, or we're going to go work on all this upgrade stuff in a separate branch. The rest of the app will continue to live in the normal world, and eventually we will come back and meet, right? You can merge changes in occasionally, things like that. But the code that you're working on is not going to see the light of day until the whole thing is done. Okay, that's what we call the Big Bang approach. And if you have some core libraries that you're upgrading, you kind of have to do that, because you can't upgrade some core library and put part of the application into production, right? Because then it'll still break. But this can work depending on your situation. So it also can be faster, because you're just working on everything at once, and then eventually you'll be doing some QA, and you'll be merging some stuff in from the main branch, the develop branch, et cetera, et cetera. So faster development time has less project overhead because no one's worrying about like merging in features as they're completed, right? Or changes as they're completed. You're basically saying you're just going to work on stuff and fix things. If you're working on the user interface, it's all going to look the same when you're done, right? Whatever you change is going to be globally visible, which is nice. The cons are QA has to do regression testing for the whole app, but that's not necessarily that bad as long as you involve them early enough in the process. Not that big of a deal. Unused parts of the app may be converted. So you may be going through and converting all these different classes and not really realizing that half of them aren't being used. And that can happen if you're kind of doing things on a global level, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means a little bit of wasted effort. But it's always nice to get rid of those dead code paths. This can be a little more risky because if there's something going on that makes the project take longer or some major problem people are running into, then you may, it's a little bit more risky because you're not really dealing with the risk incrementally, okay? So that's what the Big Bang approach looks like, and that's generally what people think about, in terms of how they do things. The other approach is the incremental approach. And this is where you basically say, all right, well, we're gonna convert parts of the application, and then we're going to merge that back into the main branch. Right? And maybe it's not being released right away, but it's going to be constantly being merged with the code new code base that's being built, bugs that are being fixed, etc. Okay. This only works in some situations where what you're doing is more like migrating sections of code, like from one framework to another, as opposed to a library upgrade. So for example, what we did for one project is we were upgrading, doing the rich faces to prime faces migration, but also we upgraded Spring, but that was later. We had to upgrade some core components to a certain level, and then we migrated hundreds of pages. And as we were going through, we were migrating a whole feature at a time. And that was going through the entire QA cycle. Each one had an issue in Jira, the issue tracker. And so there was a certain level of management that was required, right? But there's lower risk because once we merged it in, it was actually done, right? We didn't have to worry about it not working. So QA can test everything along the way. Each feature goes incrementally. And because of that, it's a little bit less risky, right? And also, we did find a lot of these dead code paths. There'd be some code, and we'd be like, well, this isn't being used by anyone. And so we got rid of a lot of dead code, which is nice. So the drawbacks to this are, if you're working on the user interface, it may look funky. Well, if you're only migrating parts at a time, right? That could be tricky. Obviously, there's a lot more project management overhead. There's a lot of stuff in the issue tracker for this project. But there's the cons. The other thing you have to keep in mind is you need to define slices. And basically what I mean by slice is sort of like an area of the entire stack of the application, right? So by doing this, you can decide which things can be handled in parallel, which things need to be handled sequentially, like what the dependencies are, essentially. So here's an example. It's actually a fairly real example. So you see at the top here, we've got upgrading Java EE to Jakarta EE, right? So if you're not familiar with that whole story, there was Java EE, which was branded by Oracle. Other companies were involved. Oracle didn't really want to work on it for a while. And when it stagnated, Spring became super popular because Java EE stagnated. And then Oracle donated all the code to the Eclipse Foundation, and the Eclipse Foundation renamed it Jakarta EE, and now it's being updated. So if you want to upgrade all your libraries and you have Java EE, old ancient Java EE stuff in there, that was Java EE 8, and now it's Jakarta EE 11. So it's dumped up. It's been several years, right? So you've got to upgrade that. That's one thing. In this example, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see this. This might help. Sorry about that. So in this example, we upgraded the UI layer from one library to another. So it was more migrating than upgrading, right? Also, they had Hibernate HBM files. Anyone remember those? Okay, a couple of you. All right. So Hibernate used to have these HBM files or XML files to kind of define the mappings. And that was, I think, pre-annotations in Java and everything. So now you just use JPA annotations and you're good to go. So they decided to migrate those. They didn't have to, right? They could have left the HBM files, but eventually Hibernate was going to drop support for them. Right? They're kind of like really, really old, right? We upgraded from Java 11 to 21, which wasn't really that big of a deal. And I tried to convince them to use 24, but it wasn't LTS, so they wouldn't do it. And just so you guys know, LTS is really just, all that means is that if you buy support from Oracle, you get long-term support, right? If you don't buy support for Java from Oracle or Azul or some other vendor, LTS makes no difference. They're all production releases. So just bear that in mind. All right, and this project actually had an ancient version of Ant. Anyone remember Ant? Okay, Ant was a build system way before Maven. You could do anything with it, which means it's really complicated to go to an old project that uses it, right? So we spent a lot of time making a multi-module Maven project, and probably if you had told us from the beginning, like, what is the scope of this project, no one would have guessed that was part of it, right? And actually, we had to fight them on that. We were like, we can't do any automated conversion for you until you upgrade to Maven. Sorry. So we got them to upgrade to Maven. Mainly because OpenRewrite, which we'll talk about in a minute, doesn't actually, no one tried to make it work with Ant, because why would you? But it works great with Maven and Gradle, so I didn't think it was really logical for us to spend effort to try and make it work for an antiquated build system when they just need to upgrade anyways. So that worked out. We got them to upgrade to Maven. They migrated from EJB to CDI, so they got rid of like remote EJBs and all that kind of old stuff, and other dependencies. All that kind of stuff. And they were using Subversion. So this is what I mean by slices, because it may not be as clear cut in terms of the different things to worry about. In each one of these things, there was a choice about whether or not we wanted to worry about it, right? They could have stayed with Subversion. They could have stuck with EJBs. Like, all of that would have probably still fulfilled the overall goal for this customer, which was to not have really big security holes in their system. They're trying to upgrade to a new version of Wildfly. So you got to define those slices and then decide which ones you care about, and then you can decide which ones can happen at the same time. So while we were migrating a lot of web pages, we had another branch going that was doing the JPA stuff because they were pretty separate, right? So we were able to parallelize some of that work. Okay. All right, so that's my preamble. I'll have to do the rest of it quickly, given the fact that it's been 30 minutes. I like to sort of set the stage. These are things you need to think about if you're going to do some sort of modernization project, right? And then the question is, well, okay, now that I've decided all that stuff, what tools do I get to use? Yay, tools, right? And can't I just take some AI tool and have it magically do it automatically for me? Because that's what AI does, right? The answer is no. No tool is going to magically do it for you. It still requires work. And if you have an enterprise system, probably you're going to have to review any AI generated code. Unless you have a smaller project, it's probably going to struggle to understand the entire context of your application, right? If you have millions of lines of code and lots of different modules and repos, probably not going to understand everything about your application. They're getting a lot better at it, but currently, probably not. Also, if your structure of your project is weird in some way, sometimes they get confused, like we do, if you get some project with a weird structure. and the context window, which may not be big enough for everything that you need to do with, right? Although I know it's getting a lot better. But, so what we like to do is stick with something that's much more deterministic as the core, and then use AI with it. Okay, so there's a tool called OpenRewrite. Anybody heard of it? Okay, so a few of you, great. So it's an open source automated refactoring ecosystem for source code. So basically, it allows you to automate making changes to your project. That's essentially what it is. It's a code transformation tool. And there's hundreds of existing recipes. It's written in Java, so it has a very strong Java following, but also it works with other languages as well. And what it does is it reads your code, and it creates this thing called a lossless semantic tree, which is sort of like an abstract syntax tree, but not really. And what's cool about it is it'll go and parse your code and create this structure. You can't see it too well there, but basically it's describing all the methods and classes and parameters and all the kind of stuff that's in your code, right? And it's called lossless because it keeps track of like comments and everything. So basically, you can write recipes that look at that LST and then change things. You can change a method name, you can add packages, you can add classes, methods, you can just change names of things, all that kind of stuff. So you can basically go and work with this LST to change your output code, right? And that's essentially what it is. And again, it works with Java, but it can work with other languages as well. Okay. And what's nice about this is that an LST, or an OpenRewrite recipe specifically, is deterministic, right? If I feed the same thing into an LLM multiple times, how many answers do I get? More than one, probably, right? Right, so an LLM is really good at doing lots of things. It can actually do some refactoring and stuff, but it doesn't do it consistently because that's not how it's built. It's non-deterministic. But if I write code to iterate over an LST and change a method name, it's consistent, right? It's deterministic. It runs the exact same way every single time, right? And if I'm migrating a system or modernizing a system, I kind of want things to work the same way, right? They're also composable. So you can have multiple different recipes and then build on top of them together, right? And mix and match in different ways, right? So you can have one recipe which is made of 4 other recipes, which each one of those may be made of other recipes, okay? And because it's just code that's running, it's auditable. You can see what it touches, what it changes. And it's been around for a decent number of years. I'm not exactly sure how many years, but there's actually a lot of code written out there to do it. And if you have a version of Spring or Jakarta EE or something like that, and you just want to upgrade, there are recipes that do that for you, right? So there's a whole set of Spring recipes that upgrade from different versions of Spring, right? So it's battle tested in that respect. And it turns out that a lossless semantic tree is actually really good for AI agents too, because instead of them having to read the code and figure out what it does themselves, they can look at the tree, which has been generated by something that's deterministic. Of course, the company behind OpenRewrite has kind of glommed onto this and has lots of products to help you feed an LST to your AI agents. Okay, and that's not really what I'm getting into, but that's just kind of where they're going with the product, which makes sense. The main difference is OpenRewrite as an open source project, it creates this LST, but it doesn't store it. It's in memory. The commercial product from Modern can store it to disk and then do it and run recipes on hundreds or thousands of repositories. So for very large organizations, they can do stuff at scale. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to show a very quick demo here. And I'm not really showing a demo, I'm just showing a couple things here. Lovely. All right, so I can't do the demo, so I'll just talk about slides more. Yep. All right, my apologies. So what I would suggest, if you want to see some of this stuff, just search OpenRewrite. You can even go to GitHub, type in OpenRewrite, whatever. They've got a whole bunch of repos with example recipes. The documentation site for OpenRewrite has a list of all the recipes that they have. And it's all sorts of refactorings that you normally do. Also things like, one of the ones I was going to show you was just changing log framework. Let's say you wanted to change from log4j to log back or something. But also, changing parts of the code that to be more modern, you can do that as well. Because you can basically look through anything in the LST and say, okay, well, let me do it this way instead of that way, okay? And the other thing I was going to show you is that you can, the way you compose different recipes is actually a YAML file. So you can actually have a YAML file with like 20 different recipes and call it like my cool recipe. And that's like one recipe, okay? So you can build, that's how you can compose things. And then when you call a recipe, you can parameterize it. So you can say, so one of the recipes we have, because we have recipes for XML files as well, one of them we have is change attribute, right? So let's say you have an attribute in an old XML file, you want to change it from foo to bar, right? Well, each time you call that recipe, you need to specify foo and bar as the two values, right? So every time you write a recipe, you can send parameters in that affect what it does, okay? So it's really handy when you have very specific operations you want to do on your code base. And as I said before, it's not just Java, it's also your POM file. It'll also do Groovy stuff. It can do JavaScript stuff. There's some C#. So really just anything that you can parse basically into an LST, you can write a recipe for. Okay. So our approach is the OpenRewrite plus agents approach. So we basically, well, let me take a step back. So this idea of using OpenRewrite and agents is not something that we came up with. It's actually something that's gone on for a while. So has anyone heard of Amazon Q before? Anybody? Q developer? We notice a big migration thing. It says, we will migrate your Java code, yada, yada, yada. So basically, what you can do is, if you have an AI tool, you can use OpenRewrite recipes and call it AI. So essentially, Amazon Q developer, its migration thing is basically a whole bunch of OpenRewrite recipes, okay? And that idea, Amazon is very famous for taking open source and then making money off of it, right? Yeah. So I think this is why some of the OpenRewrite recipes written by Modern are not pure open source anymore. They're like shared source. Basically, they're like, well, you can use it, but you can't like build a service off of it for free. So a lot of these migration tools that you hear about actually use OpenRewrite internally. Anyone heard of a Copilot app modernization? That's a fairly new one. Okay, so this is obviously from Microsoft and GitHub. So that's one. And another one would be Amazon Q code transformation, IBM application modernization accelerator. And there's probably other ones I'm missing, right? So basically what these tools do is they will use a whole bunch of OpenRewrite recipes for all the core basic stuff, like, upgrading versions of Java, upgrading Spring, that kind of stuff. And then they, depending on the tool, I know Copilot does this. Basically, it runs an agent that does a loop to fix bugs. Like it looks for bugs and then loops around trying to fix them all. And that's essentially what we do when we work on one of these projects. We run all the recipes and then we fix all the bugs, right? So these tools are not bad. It's just that you should understand that they use OpenRewrite underneath the hood. But if I were in a big Azure shop, I probably would play with the Copilot app modernization, because of course there's like a lot of features to push all your stuff to Azure, right? So they want you to modernize your stuff, put it on Azure. So you have to also understand the motivation. And usually these players just want you to put stuff on their platform. But this is generally the approach, though, is to use OpenRewrite for all the deterministic stuff, and then use agents for some other stuff as well. And what we found is we obviously do this analyzation. Some of these tools will try and analyze the code base as well and offer recommendations, come up with a plan. And so that's what we do manually. Well, we don't do it completely manually, but we do it ourselves. And then we actually have a lot of internal custom OpenRewrite recipes, but also we use open source ones as well. And we run those recipes, try and get QA involved early. And then we use AI coding assistants where it makes sense. We're really good at like boring things like upgrading Maven dependencies. We actually use them to help with the Ant to Maven conversion because it was kind of a pain. So what it generated wasn't perfect, but it was a very good starting point. And it's really good also for little like targeted things, like there was some business logic that needed to be translated or rewritten. But it was very good to basically have the LLM help us make sure that the new logic actually worked the same way as the old logic. So things like that it's really good at. And LLMs are really great at writing tests, mainly because developers don't want to, right? So I'm not saying all the tests are great, but if you want to generate some tests, especially if you don't have coverage, it's a good starting point. Copilot app migration assistant will do this as part of its process. Although I find with the AI generated tests, you still have to make sure that it's really good coverage, right? So it may generate a whole bunch of use cases, but some of them, but maybe not cover all of them, right? So keep that in mind, but you can definitely generate tests with them as well. And one thing you can definitely do is if you are writing new OpenRewrite recipes, you can get the LLM to help you write the OpenRewrite recipe. They're good at writing code, right? So why not have them write code that's going to be run deterministically and in repeatable fashion? And you can also write tests for OpenRewrite recipes as well. So you can basically use LLM to generate code that actually is going to run in a repeatable, deterministic fashion. Okay. Now the agents are getting a lot better. We've worked with like the new versions of the Anthropic's Claude model. I think Sonnet 3. The new version just came out, 4.6, I think. Anyways, so they're getting really good. Like Cloud Code is getting really good at doing loops and debugging and stuff like that. So I think what we'll be doing is, as we move forward, we'll still have the same process, but we might be using more agentic development during the process. But still, at the end of the day, you actually have to do some real software development, right? Some of these bugs, AI is not going to be able to figure out, especially if you've got very nuanced business cases, right? And you may have library behavior differences where something just, because the library is different, something's a little off, but it's not like an obvious root cause. Those are always fun to debug. Different libraries have different behaviors, things like that. API changes, of course, and fun things like class path issues. So you may have to deal with some of these yourself. So basically, once you've gone through sort of the initial process of running all the recipes and doing all the obvious stuff, then there's a lot of work of just going through use cases and fixing bugs, right? That's where you find all the edge cases that weren't covered. And also, usually with one of these projects, we end up writing new recipes, right? Because we'll find like an issue that we didn't have a recipe for, and we can just write a recipe so we can repeat it next time. Okay. Oh, and this is a very common one: is exposure of existing bugs. Anyone seen that before? You upgrade some code and you get a bug report, and you're like, wait, this has been here for like 10 years and nobody noticed, right? Okay. So let's say you get through all this stuff, you migrate everything, then what? Try and do some sort of postmortem and figure out what you saw and how you can handle it, right? So generally, you're looking at lots of old code. You're going to find tech debt. And if you find it, instead of saying, oh, that's really bad code, what are you going to do about it, right? What's the process for making it not bad code? Or is it just that we decide we don't care? But it shouldn't be like a question, right? You also will find UX issues as well that need to be fixed. Sometimes there's architectural flaws that show up as you dig deep into the code, right? And of course, one of my pet peeves is lots of duplicated code, right? Where you literally will find the same thing like 5 or 6 times in the same repo. That is something where I do generally try to fix it along the way because it just drives me crazy. So whatever issues you have, you need to look at them, figure out how you're going to handle them, even if all it means is you're putting them in the backlog. At least there's something to keep track of them, right? And then, like, are you really done? Like, did you just upgrade like Spring or Jakarta EE or something, but leave the architecture the same? If that's the case, do you need to do some refactoring? Is there some other goal that you want to achieve? Do you need to do agentic stuff? Do you need to do microservices? Do you need to replace the front end now that you've upgraded all the dependencies? Like, what's the next step, right? Where is the architecture going to go longer term than just this one project? And then when you decide what you want to do, you need to start over, right? Iteratively a big bang. So you go through the whole process again. All right, so the other thing that you can do, if you want to avoid getting into this trap, is just try and put into the process some sort of upgrade thing. Some teams try and put tech debt tickets into each sprint, or like maybe one per quarter or one, and I think that's a good idea. You just have to have buy-in so that it doesn't get pushed aside because there's some higher priority, right? It needs to actually be a fixed thing that happens. That's a good idea. You can just say, okay, every sprint we're doing like one tech debt ticket or something, So you start churning away that stuff. Yeah, don't put them back there. Okay, so that's it. I apologize for the extended delay there. Sorry for you guys who can't see the slides. And I'm sure that by the time I do my next presentation on Thursday, I will have figured out what's going on here. So thank you. If anyone have any questions? Yes.
Sorry, one question.
No, he was first.
So, one approach that I found quite useful was not to go through a modernization of the code base, but a true rewrite through extraction of the business functionality of the app, and then ask AI to go and build a new app with a stack that I'm comfortable with operating, maintaining, etc. So, and I found that approach quite interesting for reasonably sizable applications or sizable code bases, and quite successful because then the AI models are not biased to the existing code base. It's a new session, it's a new context window. You just look into the specification that was produced based on the previous code.
That's a good idea.
I wanted you to have explored that idea as well.
Yeah, so if you couldn't hear what he said was that what he's been doing is taking the legacy system and extracting the business requirements from it, and then using that to generate a new application using AI, right? Is that accurate? And that's not something I've tried yet. And I will say the projects that we've done, I mean, honestly, it's like literally within the last couple of months, the models have gotten really, really good. So this was before they really were good enough to do that. And I think now if you're able to get buy-in on that approach, it's actually really nice because everyone likes the greenfield code, right? And if you have people who are good enough at working with Cloud Code or whatever to actually have good code come out of it, I think that's good. I think the challenge is really extracting the business requirements well enough, and then also the problem that I know would be the case with some of my clients would be the timeline, because they're like, hey, we told so and so that we're going to have all of our security patches fixed in 3 months, so you need to fix it in 3 months. If we said, okay, well, we need to go through your app and figure out all the requirements about how it works, and the app is like 15 years old and has all these weird little nuances, they'd be like, no, we can't do that. But in the longer term, they'd probably be open to that because they would know they, of course, would like to have new code to work with, right? And greenfield is always fun. And I think the other thing is that if the application has a user interface, and usually I work with applications that have user interface as well, that actually would probably have to be rethought. So you'd have to get UX involved because the old one is like really old and clunky and has all these weird little features and everything. So there would have to be that sort of thing involved. So I think that would require, I feel like that's more of a rewrite. But if you don't have a user interface and it's a simpler app, then I think that could work really well. So. All right, question over there? Yes.
So can you share your experience? Have you tried to go like last minor before major, and then to the major? And do you find that recent upgrades this way are easier or harder, same as before?
So are those two questions? The question was, is it better to go like minor to major or major to minor or major?
I think from what I've seen, developers of the various libraries, they try to deprecate everything they're going to change next major. They do that in last minor.
Ah, yes,
So
okay.
I think if going these small steps, it might help to go with the incremental approach that you talked about.
Yeah, well, I think,
Even from the core library.
right. But from a library perspective, if you have OpenRewrite recipes, you can upgrade version by version. So let's say you're on let's say version 9 is the new version, and the one that you're using is 5. You would have recipes that go from 5 to 6, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, etc. So you can basically go all the way. It's just each set of recipes only deals with that jump, and that's generally how they're all built. So we haven't, basically, as long as we sometimes we have to write them, but as long as we have recipes for each major version, that seems to generally work pretty well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can talk after.